The backyard barbecue had seemed like a harmless idea when Mom first mentioned it 3 weeks ago. Just a casual Saturday afternoon, she'd said over the phone, her tone breezy and dismissive. A few neighbors, some friends from the country club, nothing fancy. I should have known better. Nothing my mother did was ever casual. By the time I pulled up to my parents' colonial-style house in McLean, Virginia, with its manicured lawn, the white hydrangeas perfectly in bloom, and the faint scent of charcoal drifting through the fall air, the place looked like a magazine spread. White rental tents flanked the pool, a caterer's van idled out front. Somewhere in the backyard, I could hear the clink of glassware and the soft hum of conversation. I parked my dusty, 10-year-old Subaru at the curb, feeling suddenly out of place among the gleaming BMWs and Teslas lining the street. My mother's casual barbecues were always diplomatic missions disguised as social events. "Sarah," Mom called as soon as I stepped into the backyard, waving me over with a cocktail in one hand. "Come meet the Hendersons. They just moved in down the street." She looked effortlessly elegant, linen dress, pearls, hair perfectly in place despite the humidity. I was still in my work clothes, dark slacks, navy blouse, the same black flats I'd worn for 14 straight hours. My hair was pulled into a tight bun, not because it looked good but because I hadn't had time to wash it since Thursday. "Sarah works for the government," Mom announced proudly, as though she were presenting an interesting antique rather than a human being. "Oh, how nice," said Mrs. Henderson, a woman whose manicure probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. "What do you do?" This was always the difficult part. "I'm an analyst," I said, keeping my tone neutral. It was true enough. I analyzed threats to U.S. national security, digital incursions, cyber warfare, covert operations, but analyst was the word civilians could understand. "Defense Department," Dad added from behind me, managing to make it sound faintly apologetic. "Can't really talk about it. Very hush-hush." He said hush-hush like it embarrassed him, as though my secrecy wasn't a matter of national security but a social inconvenience. "That's so interesting," Mr. Henderson said, clearly bored. "I'm in private equity. We just closed a $2 billion deal last quarter." "Congratulations," I said, smiling politely. The conversation drifted without me, as it always did. Around me, laughter swelled, champagne glasses clinked, and someone's child splashed in the pool. I felt invisible, the quiet daughter with a mysterious job that no one could understand or brag about. I excused myself and slipped toward the back fence, where the crowd noise faded beneath the rhythmic hum of cicadas. I sat on a bench beneath the old maple tree and pulled out my laptop, not my personal MacBook, but the hardened Panasonic Toughbook issued for field operations. It could survive fire, water, or a 3-story fall, which was more than I could say for most of my colleagues. I logged in using fingerprint, iris scan, and a 16-character rotating password. Within seconds, the secure interface bloomed to life. 3 new briefings had arrived since I'd left the Pentagon barely 2 hours earlier. A developing situation in Eastern Europe requiring immediate threat analysis. A request from SOCOM for cyber support on a high-risk hostage rescue. Routine assessments from regional directors in Stuttgart, Tokyo, and Dubai. I had barely opened the first file when a familiar voice broke my focus. "Working at a party?" I looked up to see my younger brother Marcus, beer in hand, shirt sleeves rolled, looking relaxed and self-assured. He was 2 years younger but somehow always managed to act like the older sibling. "Just checking email," I said automatically. He dropped into the chair beside me, his cologne sharp and expensive. "You know, it wouldn't kill you to relax for one afternoon. You're always so tense." "Occupational hazard." He took a long sip, watching me over the rim of his bottle. "You know, you could make twice what you're making now if you went private. Defense contractors are desperate for people like you, better pay, better hours, actual recognition. You'd probably have a corner office within a year." "I like what I do," I said, closing the laptop. "Do you?" he pressed, gesturing to me, the dark circles under my eyes, the unflattering government-issued laptop, the exhaustion I could feel deep in my bones. "You're 31, still living in that tiny apartment in Arlington, driving that ancient Subaru, working God knows how many hours a week, for what? Government pay and zero recognition?" I clenched my jaw. "I'm not doing it for recognition." "Then what? Patriotism?" He laughed, not unkindly. "Come on, Sarah, you're the smartest person I know. MIT, top of your class, master's in computer science, you could run your own firm. Instead, you're, whatever this is, What this was, I couldn't say, not to him, not to anyone. I was Deputy Director of Operations for U.S. Cyber Command, one of the youngest in the department's history, responsible for defending the nation's most critical digital infrastructure from foreign attack. But to my family, I was just Sarah, the analyst. I didn't answer. The silence stretched until Dad's voice cut across the yard. Everyone, can I have your attention? The crowd quieted. Dad stood on the patio, glass of wine in hand, wearing the satisfied expression of a man about to deliver good news. I just want to take a moment to brag about my kids, he said, beaming. Marcus has been promoted to senior consultant at McKinsey, at 29, we couldn't be prouder. Applause rippled through the crowd. Marcus raised his bottle and grinned modestly. And my daughter Sarah works for the government in some capacity we're not allowed to discuss, Dad went on, smirking, some low-level agency position, I think. She can't tell us what she does exactly, very mysterious. Laughter, polite applause, my face burned. To Marcus and Sarah, Dad concluded. To Marcus and Sarah, the crowd echoed, glasses raised. I managed a tight smile. Inside, I was already somewhere else, behind a screen, in a briefing room, tracking code streams and threat matrices. My father could never understand that my silence wasn't shame, it was duty. I opened my laptop again, mostly to escape the noise. The encrypted inbox refreshed. A new message flashed across the top. From ADM, Richardson, Cybercom. Subject, urgent, Russian intrusion detected. Classification, top secret/no foreign. My blood went cold. The message was brief, fewer than 10 lines, but it was enough. Russian intelligence had breached the Department of Energy's nuclear security network. They weren't probing, they were inside, embedded deep within the systems that monitored the U.S. nuclear stockpile. My phone vibrated with a new message from the Admiral. Need you at the Pentagon now, bringing this to the Joint Chiefs in 30 minutes. I stood up so quickly the bench scraped the stone patio. Sarah, Mom said, appearing at my side, where are you going? I have to go to work. Now? It's Saturday afternoon. It's urgent. Everything is always urgent with you, she snapped, the warmth gone from her voice. Can't you ever just take a day off and be normal? Normal. I'm sorry, I said, already moving toward the gate. I have to. What could possibly be so urgent that you have to leave your father's barbecue? I wanted to tell her, God, I wanted to tell her that the reason I was leaving was because Russian operatives were inside our nuclear control systems, that every second counted, that lives depended on what I did next. But secrecy was the first law of survival in my world. I'll call you later, I said. Dad caught up as I reached my car. This is embarrassing, he said. We have guests, important people, and you're just leaving? There's an emergency. There's always an emergency. You think we don't notice? You use work as an excuse to avoid family. You can't even stay 2 hours without running off. I gripped the car door. It's real this time. It's always real, he said bitterly. You take that little government job way too seriously. It's not your whole life, Sarah. My phone buzzed again, Russians moving deeper. Need your assessment ASAP. It is right now, I said, getting into the car. I drove away before either of them could say another word. As soon as I cleared the neighborhood, I pulled out the secure line. This is Vanguard, I said, using my call sign. En route, ETA 15 minutes. Get the watch floor spun up, I want full diagnostics before I arrive. Copy, ma'am, came the response. Admiral Richardson's already in the ops center. Joint Chiefs looped in. POTUS will be briefed within the hour. The road blurred. By the time I reached the Pentagon, adrenaline had burned away the exhaustion. Inside the secure Cyber Command Operations Center, Admiral Richardson met me with grim eyes. Thank God you're here, he said. It's bad. They're in deep, and they know we're onto them. They're mapping our nuclear architecture in real time. I took my seat, the air electric with tension. On the main threat display, a lattice of red nodes blinked across the global network, each one a live compromise. How long have they been inside? I asked. 3 months. Spearfishing campaign, slow lateral movement. We only caught them because they started pulling too much data. I stared at the screen, at the quiet, calculated invasion unfolding before our eyes, and thought, not for the first time, how invisible the front lines of war could be. While my parents toasted over cocktails, the world had just stepped 1 inch closer to catastrophe. And it was my job to stop it. I scanned the attack vectors. the malware signatures, the command and control infrastructure, layer upon layer of precision-engineered chaos. This wasn't the work of amateurs or thrill-seeking hackers. It was elegant, surgical, and deeply dangerous. This was state-sponsored. And terrifyingly effective. "Admiral, we need to brief the Joint Chiefs immediately," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Admiral Richardson stood across from me, arms folded, eyes fixed on the streaming data on the main operations screen. "Agreed," he said, "and we need authorization to execute the defensive countermeasures already in standby. Video conference in 10 minutes. You'll present the technical assessment." "Yes, sir." He didn't need to tell me twice. I'd done this before, countless times, but never at this scale, and never with stakes this high. I had just enough time to pull the data into a concise presentation before the secure communications system signaled connection. The screen flickered, resolving into 6 faces: the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and the chiefs of staff for the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Space Force. Together, they represented the most senior military authority in the country. Their expressions were tight, no one smiled. They all knew what it meant for a call like this to happen unannounced on a weekend. "Gentlemen," Admiral Richardson began, his tone even but grim, "we have a significant situation. Russian intelligence services have penetrated Department of Energy nuclear security networks. I'll let Deputy Director Chin brief you on the technical details." My heart hammered, but my voice was steady as I began. "At approximately 0400 hours today, we detected anomalous data exfiltration patterns originating from DOE nuclear systems. Forensic analysis indicates the SVR, Russian Foreign Intelligence, has maintained persistent access for roughly 90 days. 90? The chairman snapped, leaning forward. "They've been inside for 3 months and we're just finding out now?" "Yes, sir," I said, forcing my tone to remain neutral. "They employed multiple layers of obfuscation, polymorphic malware, encrypted tunnels, time-shifted payloads. Their stealth capability exceeded our current intrusion detection thresholds. The good news is they haven't breached the highest-tier command systems. The bad news is they're working toward them." "What can they access right now?" the Air Force chief asked, his face set in stone. "Currently, nuclear inventory databases, facility security schematics, and personnel files. If their lateral movement succeeds, they could reach nuclear command and control authentication subsystems." The room fell silent. No one breathed for a moment. "Jesus Christ," someone muttered. "Deputy Director Chin," the chairman said at last, "what's your recommendation?" "Immediate authorization for active cyber defensive operations," I said. "We need to neutralize their access, expel their presence, and degrade their infrastructure to prevent a rapid re-entry. If we don't act in the next few hours, they could compromise systems that directly underpin our nuclear deterrent." "Active operations means offensive retaliation," the Navy chief said, his tone skeptical. "You'd be striking Russian military networks. That's escalatory." "With respect, sir," I said, "allowing them to compromise our nuclear command and control infrastructure would be the ultimate escalation. Right now, they're inside our walls. This isn't a theoretical threat, it's an active invasion. We can't just patch and pray. We need to hit them hard enough to make them think twice before they ever try again." The chairman's eyes shifted to Richardson. "Admiral, your assessment?" "I agree with Deputy Director Chin," Richardson said without hesitation. "This is what Cyber Command was created to do. We have the tools, the teams, and the protocols in place. All we need is authority. I'll take this to the President." The chairman nodded once. "Stand by." The screen flickered as the connection went on hold. I exhaled slowly. Around the room, my team was silent, watching the frozen video feed. The hum of servers filled the air, underscored by the rhythmic tapping of keyboards as analysts continued background containment efforts. My gaze drifted to the wall clock. 1,647 hours. My parents' barbecue was probably still going. There'd be drinks and laughter, and the smell of grilled steak drifting across the lawn. Dad would be bragging about Marcus's new promotion. Mom would be wondering where I was, making polite excuses for my absence, maybe even apologizing to the neighbors. And I was in the Pentagon, waiting for presidential authorization to launch a cyber counterstrike against the Russian Federation. My personal phone buzzed. I glanced down. "Marcus, Mom says you left. Really classy, sis." I locked the screen and pushed the phone aside. 23 minutes later, the video link reconnected. The chairman's face was pale and tight. "Deputy Director Chin," he said, You have presidential authorization for defensive cyber operations. Rules of engagement are in your packet. The president wants this contained before it reaches the press. Yes, sir, I said. We'll handle it. The feed went dark. For half a heartbeat, the room was silent. Then I turned to my team, 18 of the sharpest cyber warfare specialists in the world, scattered across the operations center, waiting for my word. You heard the chairman, I said. Execute Protocol Cobra, full-spectrum defense and counter-intrusion. I want Russian presence eradicated from DOE systems within the hour, and I want their command infrastructure degraded to the point of operational collapse. Yes, ma'am, my lead operator said, already at his console, his hands blurred across the keyboard. I pulled up my own interface and began coordinating the global operation. Around the world, our assets came online, red markers on the map flaring green as regional teams in Germany, Japan, the UK, and across the US, prepared to strike. The air in the room thickened with focus. Phase 1 initiated, someone called out, isolating compromised network segments. Phase 2 prepped, another reported, counter-intrusion payloads ready. It felt like conducting a digital symphony, every keystroke a note, every sequence an instrument in perfect synchronization. On the main display, a dozen data streams merged into one coherent picture, our systems pushing forward, theirs falling back. 37 minutes in, my personal phone rang again. I almost ignored it, but when I saw the name, I sighed. Mom. I answered quietly, Mom, I can't talk right now. Sarah, she said, her voice sharp with worry, where are you? Everyone's asking what happened. The neighbors want to know why you ran off. Your father is furious. I told you, I had an emergency, I said, glancing at my screen. I'm still at work. Everything is always an emergency with you, she said. You never have time for family anymore. Do you even care what people think? Do you care what we think? On my main display, a warning flashed, Russian operators attempting a re-entry. My team moved instantly, cutting off their path, closing the loop. Their access collapsed in seconds. The final phase was underway, dismantling their infrastructure node by node. Mom, I need to go, I said. Of course you do, she said, her voice cracking. You always need to go. The line went dead. I stared at the phone for a moment, then set it face down beside the keyboard and turned back to the screens. On the display, the Russian network flared red, then darkened to gray, silent, offline. We'd done it. And as the room erupted into quiet applause, I allowed myself a single breath, deep, steady, and laced with exhaustion. Somewhere, halfway across the world, a Russian command center had just gone dark. Somewhere else, my parents were scraping the last of the barbecue plates, wondering why their daughter couldn't be normal. Neither of them would ever understand what had just happened. And that, I thought, was exactly how it had to be. She hung up before I could respond. For a moment, I just stared at the silent phone in my hand, the faint hum of the operations center filling the space around me. Screens flickered with code and network topographies. A sea of moving lines and pulsing data flows tracing across half the world. The air was thick with the low buzz of tension and adrenaline, the kind that hummed beneath your skin after hours of combat, digital combat, but war nonetheless. Ma'am, my lead analyst called out from the next console over, his voice sharp, controlled. We've successfully removed all Russian access. They're completely dark, attempting to execute countermeasures against our counter-intrusion efforts, but they're failing. I took a breath, the kind of breath that burned on the way in, and straightened. Good, I said, steadying my tone. Push forward. I want their command servers offline, every last one. Copy that, ma'am. Executing purge protocol. The next 17 minutes were a blur of keystrokes, commands, and terse confirmations. The operations floor buzzed like a living thing, 40 analysts moving in perfect synchronization, each of them plugged into the same mission, the same pulse. The giant world map on the central display shifted from red to neutral to the cool, comforting blue of secure systems. Bit by bit, the enemy vanished. When it was over, the silence was almost disorienting, just the faint hum of servers cooling, and the echo of breaths being released all at once. The Russian intrusion had been completely eradicated, their command infrastructure, degraded by approximately 60%, and in its place, we'd left behind a message, a digital signature, not malicious, not destructive, just unmistakable. They would find it when they woke up, blinking in disbelief at their own logs, and they would know exactly who had done it. Mission accomplished, Admiral Richardson said from behind me. His voice was calm, measured, but I could hear the satisfaction beneath it. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, eyes on the displays. Outstanding work, Sarah. You just prevented what could have been the most significant compromise of U.S. nuclear security in history. I swallowed, trying to tamp down the exhaustion threatening to rise. Team effort, sir, I said quietly. Your team, he corrected, turning to face me. Your plan, your execution. I'm putting you in for a commendation. Thank you, sir, I said, because that's what you're supposed to say, even when all you really want is a moment of silence. The debriefing stretched late into the night. By the time we'd run the final post-operation diagnostics, briefed DOE, and compiled the after-action report, the corridors of the Pentagon were nearly empty. The sound of my footsteps echoed down the long, sterile hallway as I made my way to the exit. My reflection in the glass looked like a stranger, eyes rimmed red, hair pulled back too tight, expression too flat. I didn't make it back to my apartment in Arlington until almost midnight. When I finally sat in the car in the garage, I saw the missed calls, 37, text messages, 53. Mom, call me immediately. Dad, this is unacceptable behavior. Marcus, what the hell is going on with you? Aunt Jennifer, your mother says you walked out of the barbecue. That's not like you. Cousin Mike, everything okay? I dropped my head against the steering wheel and let out a slow, tired laugh. Hours ago, I'd been fending off one of the most sophisticated cyber attacks ever launched against the United States, and my family thought I'd ruined a barbecue. Still, I knew I had to call, eventually. I tried Mom first. She answered on the second ring. Sarah, finally. Hi, Mom, I said softly. I'm sorry I left earlier. Something came up at work. Something always comes up at work, she said, her voice sharp and brittle. Do you know how embarrassing it was trying to explain to our guests why you disappeared? What did you tell them? That you had some minor emergency at your government job? Some paperwork crisis or something? I tried to make it sound important, but honestly, Sarah, how important can it be? A paperwork crisis. I almost laughed. If only she knew. It was more serious than paperwork, I said carefully, fighting to keep the edge out of my voice. I'm sure it felt serious to you, Mom said, in that patronizing tone she reserved for arguments she'd already decided to win, but from our perspective, it looked awful. We're hosting this nice event, introducing you to successful people, and you just walk out without a word. Makes us look bad. It makes you look unstable. I clenched my jaw. I'm not unstable, Mom, I'm doing my job. A job that apparently requires you to work every weekend, miss every family event, and maintain this ridiculous level of secrecy, she said. Sarah, normal people don't live like this. Normal people have work-life balance. My work isn't normal, I said, the frustration cracking through now. It's not a 9-to-5 office job. It's not something I can just walk away from when it's inconvenient. Because you're an analyst. Dad's voice suddenly cut in. He'd picked up the other extension. An analyst who acts like she's running the CIA or something. It's absurd. Sarah, you're not that important. And then my secure phone buzzed in my bag. A new message. From Admiral Richardson. Message, President was briefed on today's operation. He specifically asked me to pass along his thanks to you personally. Outstanding work. I stared at the screen for a long moment. The President of the United States had just thanked me. My parents thought I was an overdramatic analyst having a paperwork meltdown. I need to go, I said, my voice suddenly small. It's late. We're not done with this conversation, Dad said. We need to talk about your priorities. My priority is my job, I said, and I'm good at it, really good at it. I'm sorry if that's inconvenient for your social calendar. And before either of them could respond, I hung up. It was petty, impulsive, but I didn't care. I was too tired to care. Upstairs, my apartment was dark and quiet, the kind of silence that only existed in government-secure buildings. My parents would have called it a depressing one-bedroom. What they didn't know was that the building's walls were lined with reinforced shielding and fiber isolation layers, and that the entire structure sat within a secure federal network zone. Rent wasn't the reason I lived here. Security was. I kicked off my shoes and was halfway to the kitchen when someone knocked on the door. A knock. At midnight, my pulse spiked. I checked the security camera. Marcus. I opened the door. What are you doing here? We need to talk, he said, pushing past me into the apartment before I could answer. It's midnight, Marcus. I don't care. He turned to face me, his expression a mix of anger and worry. What's going on with you? Mom and Dad are worried. I'm worried. You're acting like some kind of secret agent, disappearing at random times, working insane hours, never talking about your job. It's weird, Sarah. I'm not acting like anything, I said. I'm just doing my job. Which is what, exactly? His tone sharpened. Because nobody believes the analyst thing anymore. You don't act like an analyst. You act like someone with power. The way you talk, the way you move, even the way you dress. It's not normal. I pressed my fingers to my temples. The exhaustion, the adrenaline crash, the weight of the entire day, it all came crashing down. I didn't have the strength to keep lying anymore. Marcus, I can't talk about my job. I've told you this 100 times. Can't or won't? Both. That's not good enough, he snapped. Mom and Dad deserve better than vague excuses. I deserve better. We're your family. And because you're my family, I said, my voice rising now, I'm trying to protect you. You think I keep secrets because I enjoy it? I do it because the less you know, the safer you are. Safer from what? He demanded. From being targeted by foreign intelligence services, I shouted, and instantly regretted it. The words hung in the air between us, sharp and electric. Marcus stared at me, eyes wide. What? Nothing, I said quickly. Forget I said that. No, he said quietly. Explain that. Targeted by what? I rubbed a hand over my face, suddenly too tired to keep up the walls. Maybe it was time, just this once, to stop pretending. Sit down, I said. He hesitated, then sat on the edge of my couch, watching me carefully. I crossed to my bag, pulled out my credentials wallet, and flipped it open. The badge gleamed under the apartment light. Sarah Chin, Deputy Director of Operations, U.S., Cyber Command, Top Secret/SCI Clearance. Marcus blinked, once, twice. This is real? He asked finally. Yes. You're a Deputy Director? Yes. You run cyber operations for the U.S. military? Yes. He swallowed. How many people work for you? About 2,000, I said, depending on how you count contractors. He was silent for a long time. The city lights filtered through the window blinds, casting lines across his face. And today's emergency? He asked at last. Russian intelligence penetrated our nuclear security networks, I said evenly. I coordinated the counter-operation. We removed them and dismantled their command structure. The president was briefed tonight. Marcus stared at me as if I'd started speaking another language. Russian intelligence, he said slowly. Nuclear security, and you're in charge of all that. Yes. He turned away, staring out the window at the quiet streets below. When he finally spoke again, his voice was softer. How long have you been doing this? 9 years total, I said, 5 as deputy director. And you never told us? I couldn't tell you, I said. Everything I do is classified, the operations, the threats, even my job title. Telling you would be a felony. But we're your family. Which, I said, is exactly why I can't tell you. Family members of senior intelligence officials are prime targets. The Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians, they all track families. They dig into relationships. They exploit them. If they knew who you were, Marcus, they'd find a way to use you against me. He looked at me for a long moment, a mixture of awe, disbelief, and something like fear. And for the first time, I saw what my work had cost, not just sleepless nights and classified stress, but distance, walls between me and everyone I cared about. He finally whispered, so, what happens now? I looked back at him, and my voice was quiet when I said, now, you forget everything I just told you. They look for vulnerabilities, I said quietly. The less you know about my actual work, the less valuable you are as a target. Marcus stared at me as if I'd started speaking another language. That's insane. That's reality, I replied. This is why I can't come to family barbecues and chat about my day. This is why I can't explain what I do or why I work the hours I work. It's not because I don't trust you. It's because I'm trying to keep you safe. He leaned against the back of the couch, running a hand through his hair. Does anyone else know? Besides you, I mean? No, I said, and you can't tell them. Marcus, not Mom, not Dad, not anyone. I shouldn't have even told you. I'm probably going to get in trouble for this conversation. But today, he said slowly, piecing it together, when you left the barbecue, you were literally going to defend against a Russian cyber attack? Yes, I said simply. And Mom told the neighbors you had a paperwork crisis? That made me laugh, and exhausted. genuine laugh that I hadn't felt in days. "Yeah," I said, smiling despite myself. "That's what she said." Marcus laughed too, a little too loudly, a little too nervously. "This is insane. You're important. You're really important." "I'm doing my job," I said, the automatic humility kicking in before I could stop it. He shook his head, still in disbelief. "No, you're defending the country, you're fighting Russians, you're briefing the president, and mom and dad think you're some low-level analyst wasting her potential." "It's better that they think that," I said. "It's safer." We talked for another hour, longer than we ever had, about my work. Even though I still couldn't give him much, I told him about the pressure, the hours, the constant surveillance. I described what it meant to lead a 1,000-person team where every keystroke could start or prevent an international crisis. I didn't talk about the classified details, but I think he understood the scale. "I need to go," he said finally, standing and rubbing his eyes. "I need to process this." "Marcus," I said, my voice firm, "you can't tell anyone. I'm serious." "I know," he said, looking at me, "but you need to understand, mom and dad don't know. They think you're stuck. They think you're unhappy. If they knew the truth." "They can't know the truth," I interrupted. "Not ever. This conversation never happened. You never saw my credentials. You know nothing about what I actually do. Understood?" He nodded reluctantly. "Understood." When he left, the apartment felt too quiet. I sat on the couch, staring at the badge I'd shown him, wondering if I'd just made a career-ending mistake. There were lines you didn't cross in my world, and I'd just sprinted past one. Still, I couldn't bring myself to regret it. Not yet. My secure phone buzzed on the table. "ADM Richardson, Joint Chiefs want to brief Congress on today's operation. Going to need you to testify in closed session Monday morning. Prepare accordingly." I sighed and opened my laptop. So much for sleep. The world didn't pause because I'd had a moral crisis. There were always more reports, more code to audit, more threats to hunt. Still, for the first time, someone in my family finally understood why. Monday morning came too quickly. The secure conference room in the Capitol was cold, the fluorescent lights unforgiving. 15 senators sat across from me behind polished wood, folders open, expressions carefully neutral. A Marine guarded the door. Every surface was soundproofed. Every word spoken here was sealed from the public record. I briefed them for 3 straight hours, how the Russian incursion had begun, how we'd traced it, how we'd coordinated the counter-operation. I showed sanitized visuals of attack paths and defensive responses, each line of code a piece of the invisible battlefield we'd fought on. The questions came fast and sharp, but I was used to that. When I finished, the committee chairman, a man with the kind of calm authority that came from 40 years of political survival, leaned forward. "Deputy Director Chin," he said, "on behalf of this committee, I want to thank you for your service. What you and your team accomplished this weekend was nothing short of extraordinary." I nodded. "Thank you, sir, just doing our job." He smiled faintly. "A job most Americans don't even know exists, but one that's absolutely vital to national security." The hearing adjourned, and I gathered my notes in silence, my adrenaline fading into a bone-deep weariness. When I stepped out into the hallway, Admiral Richardson was waiting. "The Secretary of Defense wants to see you," he said. My stomach tightened. "Sir?" "Tomorrow morning," he said, "something about a promotion." I blinked. "A promotion?" "Director of Operations is retiring next month," Richardson said, his voice even. "Word is, you're being considered to replace him. That would make you one of the youngest 3-stars in Cyber Command history." A 3-star general, Director of Operations, the top of the operational chain. It was everything I'd worked for, and everything I feared. More power, yes, but even more secrecy. Fewer people I could ever talk to honestly. "I'll think about it, sir," I said quietly. "Think fast," he replied. "The world isn't getting any safer." That evening, I met Marcus for dinner in Georgetown. He'd insisted, said it was important. "I've been thinking about our conversation," he said once we sat down. The restaurant was dim, quiet, with the kind of polished wood and low music meant for discreet business dinners. "About why you keep everything secret." "Good," I said, "because that conversation never happened, remember?" He smiled faintly. Yeah, but I wanted to say I get it now. I understand why you can't talk about it, and I'm sorry for giving you so much crap all these years." "It's okay," I said. "You didn't know." "No, it's not okay. We've all treated you like you were wasting your life, like you couldn't keep a normal job or a boyfriend or a schedule. And the whole time, he shook his head, lowering his voice. The whole time you were doing something huge. I smiled faintly. I wouldn't call it huge. I would, he said firmly, and I think Mom and Dad need to know something. Not everything, but something. They're worried about you. They think you're isolated and miserable. I can't tell them what I told you, I said, more gently this time. I know, he said, but maybe there's a way. Maybe if they just knew you had a senior position, they'd stop treating you like a failure. That's still classified, Marcus. Then what do we do? He asked. Just let them keep thinking you're a disappointment? I didn't have an answer, not then. 2 weeks later, the universe decided to answer for me. I was in my office when my phone buzzed, Dad calling. I ignored it at first, then another buzz, then another, 3 missed calls in a row. I finally picked up. Sarah, he said breathlessly, we just saw you on the news. I froze. What? You were on the evening news, in some command center, with that Admiral Richardson. They said it was Cyber Command. You were in the background, wearing your uniform. My stomach sank. A 3-second background shot. Of course. You were there, Dad said. You were clearly in charge of something. Do you work for him? I work in Cyber Command, I said evenly. I've told you that. But he hesitated. You looked like you were leading something, not just analyzing data. I can't discuss the specifics, I said, you know that. There was a pause, and then Mom's voice joined the call. Sarah, are you actually important? I almost laughed. I do important work, yes. How important? She pressed. I can't quantify that, Mom. Try, Dad said, because we've been telling people you do data analysis, and now we're wondering if we've been underselling you. I smiled faintly. You could say that. Another pause. The Admiral on TV, Mom said slowly. He's your boss? Yes, I said, my direct supervisor. And you work in the operations center? Yes. Doing what, exactly? Coordinating defensive cyber operations for the United States military, I said, carefully choosing the only unclassified phrasing available. The silence on the line stretched. I could practically hear their mental gears turning. Sarah, Dad said finally, how senior is your position? Senior enough that I can't discuss it with people who don't have clearances, I said, which includes you. Significantly senior? He asked. Yes, I admitted, significantly. Mom let out a small, shocked laugh. Oh my God, we've been telling people you do low-level analysis work. You weren't wrong, I said. I do analyze things, just at a higher level. Dad exhaled slowly. And this Russian cyber attack they mentioned, you were part of that? I can't confirm or deny that, I said, even though we all knew the answer. Another silence. Then Mom said quietly, we need to talk. Can you come to dinner this weekend? Just the 4 of us. I can try, I said, assuming no national security emergencies. Of course, Dad said, his tone softer, almost reverent. We understand if work calls. When I hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring at the phone. For 9 years, my family had believed I was wasting my potential, a workaholic with no social life and no ambition beyond some bureaucratic cubicle. Now, for the first time, they had a glimpse, just a glimpse, of the truth. They still didn't know I was being considered for a promotion that would make me one of the youngest 3 stars in Cyber Command's history. They didn't know the stress, the cost, the sleepless nights or the near misses. They didn't know that sometimes I dreamed in code, or that when I closed my eyes, I still saw threat maps and data spikes instead of faces. But they knew enough. And for the first time in a very long time, that was enough for me too.